She saved a man from being hit by a truck, unaware it was the Mafia boss who wouldn't let her go. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's begin the story. The rain poured down heavily that evening, the streets slick and glistening under the neon lights of the city. It was a typical Thursday, the kind of night when people were either rushing to escape the downpour or caught up in the chaos of their lives. Emma wasn't the type to be caught off guard by bad weather. She had learned to navigate it well. But as she crossed the street to her car, something felt off. Maybe it was the way the streetlights flickered or how the cars zoomed by with a sense of urgency, but Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. Then, out of nowhere, she saw him. A man in a dark coat, stumbling out of a nearby alley, his foot catching on the curb. He fell right into the path of an oncoming truck. Time seemed to freeze as she watched in horror, her heart pounding in her chest. Without thinking, she bolted toward him, adrenaline taking over. She pushed him out of the way just in time, but the truck's tires screeched, missing them both by mere inches. The man hit the ground hard, but Emma was already on her feet, pulling him away from the chaos. "Are you all right?" she asked, her voice shaky but determined. The man looked up at her, his eyes wide with surprise, but there was something about him that unsettled her. He didn't speak, just nodded slightly, his gaze lingering on her face for a moment too long. Emma didn't think much of it, only focusing on the fact that she had just saved a life. The man tried to get up, but Emma quickly grabbed his arm, helping him to his feet. "You're lucky. That truck almost." She stopped mid-sentence as he turned toward her fully, his intense dark eyes locking onto hers. Something about the way he looked at her made her breath catch in her throat. He looked like someone who had seen 100 things she couldn't even imagine. "Thank you," he said finally, his voice low and gravelly. He didn't sound like a man who had just almost been run over by a truck. He sounded different, powerful almost. "You're welcome," Emma replied, trying to shake the unease building in her chest. But as she turned to walk away, she felt his eyes on her. There was something unsettling about him, something that made her feel like she was in more danger than she had realized. The man didn't follow her, but as she glanced back over her shoulder, she noticed the black SUV parked a little further down the street, the headlights now flashing as it started up. Something told her this wasn't just a random encounter. She couldn't explain why, but she felt like she had just stepped into a world she didn't fully understand. Little did she know, the man she had just saved wasn't just any stranger. He was a Mafia boss, and his connection to her was just beginning. A few days passed since Emma had saved the man from the truck. She couldn't stop thinking about the encounter. There was something about him that made her uneasy, something powerful lurking behind his calm demeanor. She tried to push the thoughts aside as she went about her busy life. Work, school, and the constant battle to make ends meet. But no matter how hard she tried, her mind kept drifting back to that moment, to the way his dark eyes seemed to pierce through her, like he was reading her every thought. She had no idea who he was, or why he had seemed so familiar, but the more she tried to forget, the more she found herself looking over her shoulder. One evening, as Emma was leaving her clinic after another exhausting shift, she found herself walking down the dimly lit street towards her car. She was tired, her legs aching from the long hours, but as she reached for her keys, a black SUV rolled up beside her. Her heart skipped a beat when the window rolled down, revealing the man from the other night. "Emma," he said, his voice smooth, like honey but with an edge. "Can we talk?" Emma froze. Her instincts screamed at her to walk away, but for some reason, she couldn't. I don't think there's anything to talk about," she stammered, clutching her bag tightly. She had no idea how he knew her name, but that wasn't what unsettled her. It was the way he said it, like he had been watching her, like he knew something she didn't. "Please, just a few minutes," he insisted, his expression unreadable. "You're the one who saved my life, after all. I think you owe me a conversation." She hesitated, but something in his voice, something in the way he looked at her, made her step toward the vehicle. She couldn't explain it, but she was drawn to him, even though every fiber of her being told her to run. She got in the car, and as soon as the door closed, the man spoke again. "I'm Dante," he said, his tone calm but filled with a quiet intensity. "Dante Moretti." Emma's stomach lurched. Moretti. That name sounded so familiar. She had heard whispers of the Moretti family in passing, but she had never paid attention. She had always kept her head down, focused on her work. But now, sitting across from this man, she realized how little she knew about the world she had just unknowingly stepped into. "Why are you following me?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady, though the fear bubbling inside her was hard to control. Dante didn't answer immediately. Instead, he took a deep breath, his gaze softening slightly. "I'm not following you, Emma," he said, his voice quieter now. "I'm trying to protect you." "Protect me?" Emma scoffed, her unease growing with every word he said. "From what? I'm just a nurse. I don't need protection." "You don't understand," he said, his gaze hardening again. "You saved me from being run over. Yes, but there's more to it than that. You've seen things you shouldn't have." "I haven't seen anything," Emma retorted quickly, shaking her head. "I just did what anyone would do." Dante leaned forward slightly, his eyes never leaving hers. "You overheard something, Emma. Something you didn't mean to hear. And now, it puts you in danger." She stared at him, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know what he was talking about, but the more he spoke, the more she felt like she was standing on the edge of something much darker than she had ever known. "I don't want to be involved in whatever this is," she said, her voice shaking. "I didn't sign up for this." Dante's gaze softened again, but there was still an undeniable intensity in his eyes. "You already are involved, whether you want to be or not." "I'm not asking for your involvement, Emma. I'm asking for your trust. I'm offering to protect you from the people who would hurt you to silence what you know." The words hung in the air, heavy and foreboding. Emma felt a cold shiver run down her spine. She had no idea what she had gotten herself into, but one thing was clear: she couldn't walk away from this. She had just saved a man's life, and now she was tangled in a world she didn't understand, a world where the line between protection and danger was razor thin. She opened her mouth to refuse, but before she could speak, Dante added, "You're not safe anymore, Emma. Not from them. But I'll make sure no harm comes to you. I promise." Emma swallowed hard, her heart racing. She didn't know if she could trust him, but in that moment, she knew there was no going back. The next few days passed in a blur for Emma. She tried to go back to her normal life, but nothing felt the same anymore. The memory of Dante's words, the promise of protection, lingered in her mind. She couldn't shake the feeling that she had just stepped into something much bigger than herself, something she wasn't ready for. She couldn't help but wonder if she had made a mistake by trusting him. But at the same time, she couldn't deny that there was a pull toward him, something magnetic and undeniable. He had saved her life that night, or at least that's how it felt. Every time she thought about it, her mind replayed the image of him standing there, calm and unbothered as chaos swirled around them. It made her heart race, and she hated herself for it. She had promised herself that she wouldn't get involved with someone like him, someone dangerous and mysterious. But now, it seemed like she didn't have a choice. The days went on, and Emma found herself keeping her head down, staying out of trouble, trying to avoid any more encounters with Dante. But fate had other plans. One evening, she received a phone call from an unknown number. Her stomach twisted with anxiety as she hesitated before answering. "Hello," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "Emma, it's Dante," came the deep, familiar voice on the other end. "I need to see you. Now." She froze. Something in his tone made her blood run cold. She hadn't heard from him in days, and now he was calling, demanding to meet. "I'm busy," she said quickly, trying to avoid him. "I can't right now." But there was a pause on the other end, and then Dante's voice came again, softer this time. "It's important, Emma. Please." Emma bit her lip, torn between her instinct to refuse and the strange sense of urgency in his voice. "Where?" she asked reluctantly. "I'll send a car. Be ready in 20 minutes, he said before hanging up. Emma stood frozen for a moment, staring at her phone. Her heart pounded in her chest, her mind racing. She knew she shouldn't go, but something told her she had no choice. She grabbed her coat and hurried out the door, trying to shake the unease building in her stomach. As she walked outside, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. The door opened, and Dante's driver gestured for her to get in. She hesitated, glancing around before sliding into the back seat. The car started moving immediately, the dark city streets passing by in a blur. Dante didn't say a word, but she could feel his presence in the seat across from her, the tension in the air palpable. The ride seemed to stretch on forever, and Emma couldn't help but wonder what she was walking into. They finally arrived at a large, imposing building, its glass and steel exterior reflecting the dim city lights. It looked like something out of a movie, a world far removed from the life she knew. She stepped out of the car and followed Dante's driver through a set of heavy doors into the building. As they walked through the marble lobby, Emma felt her nerves intensify. She was out of her depth, and she knew it. Dante was waiting for her in a private office at the end of the hall. He looked the same as ever. His dark suit tailored perfectly, his eyes sharp and calculating. When he saw her, he stood up, walking toward her with that same quiet confidence that seemed to command respect without a word. "Emma," he said softly, his voice low and steady. "I'm sorry for the urgency, but I needed to speak with you in person." Emma crossed her arms, looking around the room. It was elegant, with a large desk at the center, but there was something about it that felt cold, like it wasn't meant for someone like her. "What's going on?" she asked, trying to hide the unease in her voice. Dante didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked around the desk and leaned against it, his eyes never leaving hers. "There are people after you, Emma," he said, his tone serious. "People who know what you overheard, and they won't stop until they make sure you're silenced." Emma's stomach dropped. She had heard the word danger before, but hearing it from Dante felt different, like it was more than just a threat. She had no idea what kind of world she had stepped into. But the more Dante spoke, the more she realized how little she truly understood. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dante stepped closer, his gaze softening for just a moment. "I want to protect you, Emma," he said, his voice lower now. "But to do that, you need to stay close to me. I can't guarantee your safety otherwise." Emma felt her breath catch in her throat. She had never been good at trusting people, and this was no exception. But there was something about Dante, something that made her want to believe him, even though every instinct screamed at her to run. "What's the catch?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Dante smiled, but it was cold, like he had seen it all before. "There's no catch, Emma," he said. "But there are things you don't understand. You're in danger, and I can't let you go. Not now. Not ever." Emma couldn't stop thinking about Dante's words. The more she tried to push them away, the more they settled deep into her mind. "There are people after you, Emma." His voice echoed in her thoughts, a constant reminder that she wasn't safe anymore. That night, she lay awake in her small apartment, the sounds of the city outside seeming distant, as if the world beyond her window didn't matter anymore. All that mattered was the man who had entered her life and turned everything upside down. She had saved him, but now he was the one saving her, or so he claimed. But was it really about protection? Or was there something more to it? Her mind raced, filled with a million questions, none of which seemed to have any clear answers. She couldn't deny that she was drawn to Dante, despite the danger that surrounded him. He had an aura of power that was both intimidating and magnetic, a presence that seemed to fill the room every time he entered. She tried to tell herself that she shouldn't get involved with him, that it was too risky, but every time she saw him, that thought faded away. She was no longer just a woman trying to get by, surviving from paycheck to paycheck. She was now part of a world she didn't understand, and whether she liked it or not, there was no going back. The next day, Emma returned to the clinic, trying to focus on her patients, but her mind kept drifting back to the conversation with Dante. He had promised to keep her safe, but she knew better than to take everything at face value. As much as she wanted to trust him, there was a part of her that couldn't shake the feeling that she was being drawn into something far darker than she had anticipated. Her phone buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. It was a text from an unknown number. "Meet me at the usual place tonight." Emma's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't heard from Dante since their conversation at the office. The usual place could only mean one thing: Dante's mansion. She stared at the message for a long moment, her fingers hovering over the screen. She knew what she should do: ignore it, continue with her life, keep her distance. But something in her pulled her toward him. Maybe it was the promise of safety, maybe it was the curiosity, or maybe it was the undeniable pull she felt every time she thought about him. Without thinking, she typed back, "I'll be there." Later that evening, Emma found herself standing outside Dante's mansion once again. The tall, iron gates loomed in front of her, guarded by two men in dark suits, their eyes scanning the area with military precision. As soon as they saw her, one of them stepped forward and motioned for her to come in. She took a deep breath and stepped through the gates, the weight of what she was about to do settling heavily on her shoulders. The moment she entered the mansion, the atmosphere shifted. The cold marble floors, the grand staircase, and the opulent furniture all seemed to whisper of power and secrets. Dante was waiting for her in the same private office as before, his sharp eyes watching her as she entered. "You came," he said, his voice steady, but there was something unreadable in his gaze. "I said I would," Emma replied, trying to sound calm, but her heart was racing. "Why am I here, Dante? What is this all about?" Dante stood up, walking toward her slowly, the silence between them heavy with unspoken words. "You know why you're here," he said softly, his hand brushing a strand of hair from her face. Emma flinched at the touch, but he didn't seem to notice. "You're in danger, Emma, and I can't let you leave until I know you're safe." "Safe from what?" Emma asked, her voice trembling. "From the people who want to use you against me," he replied, his voice low and filled with a dangerous edge. "I told you, you overheard something. They know what you know, and they won't stop until they have you." Emma swallowed hard, her throat dry. She had no idea what he was talking about, but the fear in his eyes made her believe every word. "You need to stay here with me, at least for now," Dante continued, stepping closer, his presence overwhelming. "I can protect you, Emma. I promise." "I don't want to be a prisoner, Dante," Emma said, her voice rising slightly. "I don't want to be part of this world. I didn't ask for any of this." Dante's expression softened, but there was no mistaking the firmness in his words. "You're not a prisoner," he said gently. "You're my responsibility now, and I'll do whatever it takes to keep you safe." Emma stood frozen, torn between the fear of the unknown and the strange sense of safety Dante offered. She had never been in a situation like this before, never been so close to someone so powerful, so dangerous. But as much as she wanted to fight it, as much as she wanted to walk away, she knew she was already too far in. There was no going back now. "All right," she said quietly, her voice barely a whisper. "I'll stay. For now." Dante's eyes softened, but there was still an intensity in his gaze, something that spoke of the world he inhabited, a world Emma wasn't sure she was ready for. But it was too late. She was already caught in it, and there was no turning back. Emma woke up the next morning feeling as though the world had shifted overnight. The soft light of dawn filtered through her curtains, but it did little to ease the tension in her chest. She had agreed to stay with Dante, to trust him in ways she had never trusted anyone before, and now she was questioning every decision she had made. What kind of world had she stepped into? And more importantly, what kind of man was Dante Moretti, really? The previous night felt like a blur. She had told herself it was just temporary, just a way to stay safe until she figured out what to do. But deep down, she knew she had already made a choice. She was involved now, and there was no turning back. Dante's mansion had felt like a prison when she walked through its gates. The tall, black iron gates, the security, the luxurious interior. It was all designed to make her feel small, insignificant. But what terrified her most wasn't the wealth or the opulence. It was the power that radiated from Dante. He wasn't just a man, he was a force. She had never been this close to someone so dangerous, so commanding. She had never felt so out of her depth. The day passed slowly. She tried to focus on her work, but her thoughts kept drifting back to Dante. What had he meant when he said she was his responsibility now? Did that mean he was truly looking out for her, or was there something more sinister beneath the surface? Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his intense gaze, the way he looked at her with such intensity, as though he could see straight through her. By the time evening came, Emma had worked herself into a frenzy of doubt. She had agreed to stay with Dante, to trust him, but what if she had made a huge mistake? What if he wasn't the protector he claimed to be? What if he was just another dangerous man with his own agenda? She was interrupted by a knock on her door. It was a soft, rhythmic tap, but it was enough to send a jolt of panic through her. She didn't have to open it to know who was on the other side. Dante. She took a deep breath and opened the door. He stood there, as composed and commanding as ever, his dark eyes scanning her face for any sign of distress. "You're still up," he said, his voice low and steady. I wanted to check on you. I'm fine, Emma replied quickly, trying to hide the unease that bubbled beneath the surface. She wasn't fine, but she wasn't about to admit it to him. Not yet. Good, Dante said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. His presence filled the room, making it feel smaller, more suffocating. I'm glad to hear that. But I need you to understand something, Emma. You're not just here for your safety. You're here because you're important to me. You're mine now. The words sent a chill down her spine, but she refused to show any fear. She had to remain strong. What does that mean? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dante stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. It means that I won't let anyone harm you. I'll protect you, even if it means doing things you don't understand. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, the touch surprisingly gentle, though there was an unmistakable possessiveness in it. You're safe with me, Emma. But don't make the mistake of thinking you're free to leave. Once you're in my world, there's no going back. The words hit her like a wave, crashing over her and pulling her deeper into a world she didn't fully understand. She knew she couldn't leave, not now. Not when she was so tangled up in Dante's world. Not when she had already begun to feel a strange connection to him. But that didn't mean she had to like it. I never asked for this, she said, her voice shaking slightly. I never asked for any of it. Dante's expression softened, but only for a moment. I know, he said quietly. But sometimes, life forces us into situations we don't ask for. And when it does, we have to make a choice. I don't want to be your prisoner, Dante, Emma said, her voice firm now. I don't want to be part of your world. Dante's eyes hardened, and for a moment, Emma saw a flash of something darker in him. You already are, Emma, he replied, his voice low and cold. You've been part of it since the moment you saved me. You belong to me now, and there's nothing you can do to change that. The weight of his words settled over her like a heavy blanket, suffocating her. She wanted to argue, to fight, to leave, but she knew it wouldn't make a difference. She was already too deep in. There was no way out now. Dante took a step back, his eyes never leaving her face. I'm not your enemy, Emma. I'm your protector, and you'll learn to trust me, in time. But for now, all I need you to do is stay. Stay with me. Stay safe. The room felt colder now, the distance between them growing, even though he stood right in front of her. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking down a path she couldn't return from. She had saved him, and now he was saving her. But what would it cost her in the end? The days that followed felt like they were moving in slow motion for Emma. Each one blurred together in a haze of confusion, fear, and unexpected moments of tenderness. Despite the tension that seemed to hang over every room she entered, there was something about Dante's presence that calmed her, a strange comfort in the way he looked out for her, even when she wasn't asking for his protection. But the more she tried to resist, the deeper she found herself pulled into his world. She had spent enough time around Dante now to know there were more things left unsaid than things that were spoken. His world was dangerous, full of shadows that he kept hidden from her, but it was also a world where he seemed to have control over everything, even her thoughts. She hadn't realized it at first, but as the days went by, Emma started to notice how much of her life had started to revolve around him. Every time she left his mansion, every time she went to work, she couldn't help but think about him. About his promises to keep her safe, about the way he said things that made her feel like she had no choice but to trust him. She tried to tell herself that it was just a phase, that this dangerous attraction was temporary, that she could break free at any time. But deep down, she knew that wasn't true. Her life was no longer hers to control. She had stepped into a game where the rules were different, and Dante held all the cards. That evening, Dante invited her to dinner at one of his favorite restaurants. She was hesitant at first, but there was no way to refuse him, and she didn't want to. There was something about his invitation, something about the way he looked at her, that made it impossible for her to say no. The restaurant was a luxurious, dimly lit place, the kind of place where people went to make deals and disappear into the shadows. As soon as they entered, the entire atmosphere seemed to shift. Dante moved through the crowd like he owned the place, his presence commanding the attention of everyone around them. It was as if the world bent to his will, and Emma couldn't help but feel out of place, like she was the only one who didn't belong. They sat at a secluded table near the back, away from prying eyes. As the waiter poured their wine, Dante studied her with an intensity that made her uneasy. "You don't have to stay here, you know," he said, breaking the silence. "You could leave, but I'd prefer if you stayed. I want to keep you close." His words sent a shiver down her spine. The possessiveness in his voice was undeniable, but it wasn't the first time she had heard it. It was the way he always spoke to her, like she was his responsibility, his to protect, but also his to control. Emma met his gaze, trying to steady herself. "I'm not sure I'm ready for this, Dante," she said quietly. "I'm not sure I want to be part of this life, of your world." He didn't look away, his dark eyes locking onto hers with an unwavering intensity. "You're already part of it, Emma," he said, his voice soft but firm. "Whether you want to be or not. I told you before, once you saved me, you became mine. You don't get to walk away from that." Emma felt her chest tighten. She had known this was coming, had known that Dante would keep her close, keep her in his world. But hearing him say it aloud, so plainly, made it feel like a cold, hard truth she couldn't escape from. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Dante reached across the table, taking her hand in his. His touch was surprisingly gentle, but there was a firmness to it, a subtle reminder that he was in control. "I want you to trust me, Emma," he said quietly. "I want you to understand that I'm not just protecting you for my sake. I'm doing it because I care. I want you by my side. I don't want to keep you in the dark anymore, but there are things you don't understand yet. Things that I'm not ready to tell you." His words only deepened the mystery surrounding him. What was he hiding? What was he not telling her? She had no answers, and it made her nervous. She didn't know how much longer she could live in this uncertainty. She didn't know how much longer she could pretend that everything was fine, that everything was under control. "I don't know if I can keep doing this," Emma said, her voice faltering. "I don't know if I can keep living like this, not knowing what's going to happen next." Dante squeezed her hand gently, his eyes softening for a moment. "I'll take care of everything, Emma," he said, his voice low and reassuring. "You don't have to worry about anything. You're safe with me. No one will hurt you. Not while I'm around." Emma couldn't shake the feeling that the more she allowed herself to be around him, the deeper she was sinking into a world she couldn't escape. She had trusted him once, but now, every word he spoke, every move he made her wonder if she had made the right choice. Dante's world was one of power, of danger, and of unspoken rules. And no matter how much she told herself she could walk away, she knew deep down that there was no way out now. Emma spent the next few days in a haze. She had agreed to stay with Dante, to let him protect her, but the tension in the air between them grew thicker with every passing hour. His promise to keep her safe seemed both reassuring and suffocating. She was beginning to feel like a bird in a gilded cage, unable to leave, yet not fully sure she wanted to. Each moment she spent at his mansion was like stepping deeper into a world she didn't fully understand. The luxurious rooms, the imposing security, the silence that filled every corner. It was all so foreign to her. She had lived a simple life before Dante, focused on her work and trying to make ends meet. Now, she felt like an unwilling guest in a dangerous game, a game whose rules she was still trying to figure out. One evening, Dante invited her to one of his meetings. At first, Emma had no idea what it was about, but when they arrived, she quickly realized it was a gathering of people from his world, wealthy, influential, and undeniably powerful. The room was filled with men and women who exuded authority, their faces cold and calculating. Dante was in the center, his presence commanding the room without a word. Emma stood by his side, feeling like an outsider as conversations flowed around her. She couldn't understand the full scope of what was being discussed, but she could sense the undercurrent of tension in the air. Everyone seemed to be afraid of making the wrong move, and Dante was the one in control. He moved through the room with ease, greeting people with a nod, his eyes sharp and watchful. Emma watched him, noting the way he interacted with the others. There was a level of respect, even fear, that followed him wherever he went. She had never seen him like this, and it made her uneasy. She had known that Dante was dangerous, but now she could see it in the way people reacted to him. It was clear that he wasn't just a man in charge, he was a force, and his world was one where power ruled above all else. As the night wore on, Emma found herself growing more and more uncomfortable. The tension in the room was palpable, and she felt like she was just a pawn in a much larger game. Dante had, been kind to her, had promised to protect her. But was that all there was to it? She had started to wonder if there was more at play here, something she hadn't yet discovered. She couldn't help but feel like she was being pulled deeper into a world she couldn't escape. After the meeting, Dante led her to the private area of the mansion where they could be alone. Emma was quiet, her mind racing with questions she didn't know how to ask. Dante didn't seem to notice, or maybe he did, but he didn't care. He had a way of keeping things just out of reach, always a step ahead, always in control. "You did well tonight," Dante said, his voice calm, but there was an underlying tension to it. Emma didn't know how to respond. She had only been standing there, listening to conversations she couldn't understand, trying to make sense of it all. "I don't know what I'm doing here," she admitted finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Dante turned to face her, his eyes studying her with a mixture of curiosity and something deeper. "You're here because I need you, Emma," he said softly. "You're here because you're mine, and that means I'll protect you no matter what." She took a step back, her mind reeling. "What does that mean?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You're not just protecting me," she added, her heart racing. "You're controlling me." Dante's expression softened slightly, but there was still a coldness to it. "I'm not controlling you, Emma," he said, his tone firm but not unkind. "I'm making sure you're safe. You don't understand what it means to be in my world, but you will. And when you do, you'll see that everything I've done has been for you. For your safety." Emma shook her head, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. She had wanted to believe him, had wanted to trust that he was just protecting her. But now, standing there in his mansion, surrounded by the people who clearly feared and respected him, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this than he was telling her. "I don't know if I can do this, Dante," she said, her voice shaking. "I don't know if I can live in your world. It's too much." Dante stepped closer, his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made her heart race. "You don't have a choice, Emma," he said, his voice low and unyielding. "You're already in it, and I'll make sure you're safe, no matter what it takes." Emma felt a wave of panic rise in her chest. She didn't know what to do, what to believe. Dante had promised her safety, but the more she saw of his world, the more she realized how little she truly understood it. How could she trust him when she didn't even know if she could trust herself anymore? She had saved his life, but now, she felt like she was the one trapped in a world she couldn't escape. And Dante, the man who promised to protect her, might just be the one who was keeping her prisoner. Emma spent the following days in a whirlwind of confusion and mounting anxiety. She had agreed to stay with Dante, to trust him, but with each passing hour, the weight of her decision grew heavier. Dante's promise to protect her had come with conditions she hadn't fully understood, and now she found herself tangled in a world she didn't know how to escape. The mansion, once a symbol of luxury, now felt like a cage. The cold marble floors, the high ceilings, the ever-watchful security, it all screamed control. It was as if Dante was constantly reminding her that she was under his watchful eye. Despite the tension, she couldn't deny the pull she felt toward him. He was powerful, charismatic, and dangerous. He made her feel safe in ways she hadn't known she needed, but he also made her feel trapped, like a pawn in his carefully constructed world. She had never been part of something like this before, and the more she learned, the more questions she had. She spent her days walking through the mansion's grand halls, trying to keep busy, to make sense of everything. But her mind kept returning to Dante. What did he really want from her? And what was the cost of all this protection? He had promised to keep her safe, but at what price? The more she thought about it, the more the walls seemed to close in. It was late one evening when Dante's presence became even more undeniable. He appeared in her doorway, unannounced, his dark eyes piercing through her. "You're quiet tonight," he said, his voice low and steady. "You've been avoiding me, Emma." She looked up from the book she had been reading, startled. She hadn't realized how much she had been avoiding him. But now, with him standing in front of her, it was impossible to ignore the tension between them. "I'm not avoiding you," she said, trying to sound casual. "I've just been thinking." Dante didn't move, his gaze unwavering. "Thinking about what?" "About everything," Emma replied, her voice shaky. "About you. About this world. I don't know if I can keep living like this, Dante. I don't know if I can keep pretending that I'm okay with it." There was a brief silence, one that stretched between them like a tightrope. Dante took a step closer, his presence overwhelming. You're not pretending, Emma, he said softly. You're mine now. You belong to me, and that means I'll take care of you. No one will harm you. Not while I'm here. Emma felt a shiver run down her spine. His words were both comforting and terrifying. She had never been in a relationship like this, where control and protection were so tightly interwoven. But what if I don't want to belong to you? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dante's eyes darkened, the familiar intensity returning. You don't have a choice, he replied, his tone now colder, more certain. You saved my life, Emma. You knew what you were getting into the moment you did that. This is the world you're in now. His words hit her like a slap, and she could feel her chest tightening with panic. She didn't want this. She didn't want to be a part of his world, a world that was so far removed from the simple, ordinary life she had once known. But she had already crossed that line, and there was no turning back. I never asked for this, she said, her voice breaking. Dante reached out, his hand gently cupping her chin as he forced her to meet his gaze. You're here now, he said softly, and I'm not letting you go. You're mine. Forever. There was something in his eyes, a quiet determination that told her that this wasn't just about protection. It was about possession. It was about control. Emma could feel her pulse quicken as the reality of his words settled in. She was trapped, but part of her didn't want to leave. Despite the fear, despite the uncertainty, there was a strange comfort in his presence, a feeling of safety that she had never known before. She wanted to hate him for what he was doing, but she couldn't. She was already too far gone. I'm not asking you to love me, Emma, Dante said, his voice softer now. But I need you to trust me. I need you to understand that everything I'm doing is for you. I'll keep you safe, I'll keep you close, and I'll never let anyone hurt you. Not ever again. Emma swallowed hard, her throat dry. But what about me? She whispered. What if I want to leave? Dante's eyes softened for just a moment, but there was still an unshakable force in his gaze. You can't leave, he said, his voice low. Not now? You belong to me, Emma, and that's not something you can walk away from. The finality in his words made her heart race. She was stuck, and as much as she hated the idea of being trapped, part of her didn't want to leave. She had saved him, and now he was saving her. The question was, at what cost? Emma woke up to the sound of rain hitting the windows, a steady, rhythmic sound that matched the uncertainty swirling in her mind. She had agreed to stay with Dante, to trust him, but now, with each passing day, she found herself more and more entangled in his world. His presence was everywhere, and no matter how much she told herself that she could walk away, she knew deep down that she was already too far in. The mansion had become her home, but it felt more like a prison. The walls were high, the doors locked, and the shadows seemed to whisper secrets she wasn't sure she was ready to hear. She had tried to maintain some distance, to keep her life separate from his world, but every time she thought she had a grip on things, Dante's actions made her question her resolve. He was always there, always watching, always protecting her in ways she didn't understand, but at the same time, his control over her life was growing, and she didn't know how to stop it. It wasn't just the way he spoke to her, as though she belonged to him, but the way he handled everything around her. He made decisions for her without asking, pulling her deeper into his world whether she wanted to be a part of it or not. She was constantly aware of the watchful eyes around her, the guards, the security cameras, the quiet surveillance that never seemed to end. Even when she was alone, there was always a sense of being observed, of being watched. That night, after another tense dinner at the mansion, Dante pulled her aside in a quiet room. His face was hard, his eyes dark with something she couldn't quite name. She had learned to read him, but even now, there were parts of him that remained a mystery. You're starting to get restless, Dante said, his voice low and steady. Emma shifted uncomfortably, the weight of his words pressing down on her. I'm not restless, she replied, her tone defensive. I just don't understand what this is all about, Dante. What do you want from me? You keep telling me that you're protecting me, but it feels like you're controlling every part of my life. I don't even know what's real anymore. Dante stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. She had no room to retreat, and despite the tension between them, she couldn't pull away. I'm protecting you because I care about you, Emma. But you have to understand something. You're not in control here. You never were. And neither was I. This life we're living, it's not like what you knew before. You saved me, and now you're part of my world. Whether you like it or not. The words stung, but Emma couldn't deny the truth in them. She had saved him, and now she was caught in a web of his making, a web she didn't know how to escape. But I didn't ask for this, Dante, she said, her voice trembling. I didn't ask for any of it. I just wanted to help. He reached out, his fingers brushing her cheek, the touch sending a chill through her. I know, he said softly. I didn't ask for this either. But you're mine now, Emma, and I'll protect you no matter what. I'll keep you safe, and I'll keep you close. That's the promise I made to you, and I don't break my promises. Emma swallowed hard, her throat dry. She felt the weight of his words, but she wasn't sure if she believed them. Could she trust him? Could she trust herself in this new world she had found herself in? I don't know if I can live like this, Emma whispered, her voice cracking. I don't know if I can live in this constant state of fear, of not knowing who to trust. I thought I was safe here, but now I'm not so sure. Dante's face softened for a moment, but there was a hardness to his eyes that wouldn't fade. You are safe, Emma. I'm not like the others. I won't hurt you. The words were meant to comfort her, but they didn't. If anything, they only made her feel more trapped. She wasn't just living with Dante anymore. She was living under his rule, in his world, where every decision was made for her, every action scrutinized. She had no control, and she didn't know how much longer she could stand it. What if I don't want to be part of this world? She asked quietly. What if I don't want to be yours? Dante looked at her with a mixture of frustration and something darker, something she couldn't quite name. You don't have a choice, Emma. You've already made your choice the moment you saved me. And now, there's no going back. Emma felt the walls close in on her. There was no escape, no way out. She was stuck in this world, in this life, and there was nothing she could do to change it. But as much as she wanted to walk away, as much as she wanted to scream, there was a part of her that couldn't. There was a part of her that needed him, needed the safety he offered, even if it came with a price. And that was what terrified her the most. The following week passed in a haze for Emma. Each day felt like a repeat of the last, as she moved through the motions of her life in Dante's world, struggling to find a sense of peace. She woke up in his mansion every morning, surrounded by luxury that felt like it belonged to someone else. She ate with him, sat in silence with him, and felt like a stranger in her own life. Her thoughts were a constant swirl of confusion and uncertainty. She had saved him, and now she was caught in the web of his world, trapped by his promises, by the life he had pulled her into. Dante's presence was everywhere, his watchful eyes always on her. No matter where she went in the mansion, he seemed to be just around the corner, waiting. At first, it had felt reassuring, even comforting, but now, it felt suffocating. She began to question everything she had once believed about herself. She had always been independent, self-sufficient, and now she felt like she was losing herself to this world that Dante controlled. She couldn't keep pretending that she was fine with it, but every time she tried to voice her concerns, Dante would shut her down, telling her that he was doing this for her protection. But what was she really being protected from? The more she thought about it, the more the doubts crept in. One night, after dinner, Dante took her to the private lounge in the mansion, a room that overlooked the city. The view was breathtaking, but Emma barely noticed. Her mind was too full of questions, too full of the unsettling feeling that she was losing control of her own life. Dante stood by the window, watching the city below, and she couldn't help but watch him. He was so calm, so composed, like he always was, but there was something in his eyes that spoke of the dark world he had built around them. She had never been able to fully understand him, and now, she wasn't sure if she ever would. Emma, Dante said suddenly, breaking the silence. She looked up, startled by the sound of her name. You're quiet tonight. I can see it in your eyes. You're not happy. She swallowed, not sure how to respond. I'm just trying to figure things out, she said finally, her voice shaky. I don't know if I can keep doing this, Dante. I don't know if I can keep living like this. Dante turned to face her, his eyes intense, but there was a softness to his expression that she hadn't seen before. He took a step toward her, and she instinctively took a step back, though she didn't want to. What do you mean? He asked quietly. You're safe here. I promised I would protect you. She shook her head, feeling tears well up in her eyes. But at what cost, Dante? I don't know who I am anymore. You say you're protecting me, but I don't feel free. I feel like I'm trapped, like I've lost myself in this world you've created. His expression softened, and he closed the distance between them. He reached for her hand, his touch surprisingly gentle. "You're not trapped, Emma," he said, his voice low. "You're safe. You're mine, and that means I'll keep you safe. I'll give you everything you need. Everything you deserve." She pulled her hand away from his, her heart racing. "I didn't ask for this, Dante. I didn't ask to be yours. I didn't ask for this world. I just wanted to help you. But now, I'm stuck, and I don't know how to get out." Dante stepped back, his face hardening, the familiar coldness returning. "You saved my life, Emma. And you've become part of mine. You don't get to walk away from that. Not now. Not after everything we've been through." His words hit her like a punch to the gut. She wanted to scream, to tell him that she wasn't his, that she was her own person, but the words wouldn't come. Dante's presence was overwhelming, suffocating. "I don't want to be your prisoner," she whispered, her voice trembling. "But I feel like I am. I don't know how to get out of this." Dante looked at her for a long moment, his gaze unreadable. Finally, he spoke, his voice quiet but firm. "You're not a prisoner, Emma. You're my responsibility. I will protect you, no matter what it takes. But you're right about one thing. You can't leave. You belong to me, and that's something that doesn't change." The finality in his words settled over her like a weight, pressing down on her chest. She had saved him, but in the end, she was the one who was trapped. Trapped in a world she didn't want, with a man who claimed her as his own. There was no escape, and deep down, she knew it. And as much as she hated it, a part of her couldn't walk away. Not now. Not after everything. The following days felt like they were slipping through Emma's fingers. The weight of Dante's words, the certainty that she belonged to him, pressed heavily on her chest. She had never been someone who relied on anyone, let alone a man like Dante. His promises of protection were starting to feel more like chains than security. She couldn't breathe in this world anymore, yet she couldn't bring herself to leave. The mansion was quiet most of the time, but she was never truly alone. The ever-present security, the silence that seemed to follow her wherever she went, and the way Dante's eyes always seemed to be watching her, it was all becoming too much. She was losing herself, piece by piece. Each time she tried to break free, each time she considered leaving, Dante's words echoed in her mind. "You belong to me now." She had saved his life, and now she was trapped in a world she didn't understand, living under his control. But what was worse, being trapped by Dante, or staying in a world where she no longer knew who she was? She spent most of her days locked in her thoughts, unable to fully connect with anyone, even herself. Dante had become both her protector and her captor, and Emma couldn't figure out which one she feared more. She had known from the beginning that there was no easy escape, but she didn't realize just how deeply she was bound to him. Every time she looked into his eyes, she saw something more, a promise of safety, of power, of control. But at what cost? It was a question that weighed heavily on her, especially when she found herself drawn to him, despite everything. The tension between them had grown in the last few days. Emma couldn't explain why she kept coming back, why she couldn't shake the feeling that this was her fate. That evening, Dante took her to a private event, a gathering of influential people in the city. As always, Dante was the center of attention. He was charismatic, commanding, and the people around him respected him in ways that both fascinated and terrified Emma. They moved through the crowd, and Emma felt the eyes on her, the whispers behind her back. She had become part of his world, whether she liked it or not. The luxury, the power, the danger, it was all consuming, and she couldn't escape it. As they stood near the bar, Emma felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to find Dante's cold gaze watching her. "You're quiet tonight," he said, his voice low and serious. "What's on your mind?" Emma swallowed hard, unsure of how to respond. "I'm just thinking," she said, trying to sound casual, "about everything." Dante stepped closer, his breath warm against her ear. "What do you mean, everything?" "This world," Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't ask for this, Dante. I didn't ask to be part of your life, part of your world. But I'm here now, and I don't know if I can keep living like this." Dante's eyes narrowed, his expression unreadable. "You don't get to decide, Emma. You're mine now, and you'll learn to accept it." The coldness in his voice sent a chill down her spine. She had never seen him like this, so possessive, so certain. He stepped back, his eyes still locked on hers. "I've kept you safe so far. You don't need to worry. You're part of my world now, and I'll protect you, no matter what." Emma wanted to argue, wanted to scream that she didn't want to be part of his world, that she didn't want to be his possession. But she couldn't. She couldn't find the words, couldn't find the strength to walk away. She was trapped, and she didn't know how to escape. Dante's world had become hers, and she wasn't sure if she hated it or if she had already grown too attached to it. The night passed in a blur of faces and conversations that she couldn't bring herself to care about. Dante was always by her side, always watching her, always keeping her close. She knew that this life was not hers to control, but a part of her couldn't help but wonder if there was a way to find freedom in his world, a way to make peace with the life he had drawn her into. She had saved him, but now she wasn't sure if she was saving herself, or if she was simply being swallowed whole by his world. As the night came to a close, Dante led her back to the mansion, the silence between them heavy. She had no idea what tomorrow would bring, but she knew one thing for sure. She was no longer just a bystander in his world. She was part of it, and there was no turning back. The days following the event at the private gathering seemed to drag on for Emma. Every time she tried to push the memory of the evening away, the image of Dante, so powerful and so commanding, filled her thoughts again. She had saved him, but now she was the one feeling trapped in his world. Every action, every decision, seemed to be influenced by him. She couldn't make sense of it, and she couldn't escape it. The mansion, once a symbol of luxury, now felt like a gilded cage. She was constantly aware of the eyes watching her, the ever-present security, the guards who moved silently in and out of her line of sight, making her feel both protected and hunted. It was the silence that unnerved her the most. Dante's world was quiet, cold, and calculated, a stark contrast to the noisy, bustling life she once knew. She had wanted to help him, to save him, but now, she wasn't sure who needed saving. Her thoughts were always racing, but each time she thought of leaving, of stepping out into the world she had left behind, the fear of what would happen if she did paralyzed her. Dante had been nothing but kind to her in his own way, and yet there was always an underlying tension, an unspoken understanding that she was his, and that her life was now entwined with his in ways she couldn't untangle. She had saved him from death, but now she was drowning in a different kind of captivity. She spent her days in the mansion, wandering its halls, trying to find some semblance of normalcy. But the walls felt closer, the air heavier. It wasn't just the constant surveillance or the way Dante seemed to control every moment of her life. It was the way he watched her, always observing, always measuring her. It was like he could see everything, even the parts of herself she had never shown anyone. It was unsettling, and at times, it was suffocating. One evening, after another quiet dinner where conversation had been limited, Dante led her into his study. The moment she entered the room, the air shifted. There was a tension between them, thick enough to cut with a knife. He closed the door behind them and turned to face her, his gaze intense, unreadable. "You're still distant," he said, his voice low, almost curious. "What's on your mind, Emma?" His words hit her like a wave. She had been distant, hadn't she? She had been trying to keep her thoughts to herself, to shut him out, but it was becoming impossible. There was no hiding from him, not anymore. "I'm just trying to understand everything," she said, her voice shaky. "I'm trying to understand why I'm here, why you're doing this." Dante stepped closer, his presence looming, but there was no aggression in his movements, just a calm certainty. "You're here because I need you, Emma," he said. "You saved me, and now I'm making sure you're safe. You're not just a part of my life, you're a part of everything. And that means I'll do whatever it takes to protect you, no matter the cost." "I didn't ask for this," Emma whispered, her heart racing. "I didn't ask for you to protect me, Dante. I didn't ask for any of this." Dante's eyes softened for a moment, but only just. He reached out, his fingers brushing her cheek. "You think I want to control you?" he asked, his voice quieter now, though still firm. "You think I want to trap you in this world? No, Emma. I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing this for you. You're here because you matter to me." The words hung in the air, and Emma didn't know how to respond. Part of her wanted to scream, to tell him she wasn't his possession, but another part of her, some part she couldn't ignore, wanted to believe him. She had seen a side of Dante that was protective, caring even, but there was always that dark edge, that underlying danger in his words and actions. "What if I want to leave?" she asked quietly, almost afraid to voice the question. "What if I want to go back to my life?" Dante's gaze hardened, his jaw clenching slightly. You can't leave, Emma. Not now. You've made your choice the moment you decided to save me. This world, my world, it's yours now, whether you accept it or not. His words were final, and something about the way he said them made her heart skip a beat. She wanted to fight it, wanted to scream that she had a life outside of him, outside of his world, but the truth was, she didn't. She had walked into this world, into his life, willingly, and now there was no escaping it. I never asked for this, Dante, she repeated, her voice shaking with the weight of everything she was feeling. But you've made me a part of it. And now, I don't know how to get out. Dante stepped even closer, his voice softening. You don't need to get out, Emma, he said, his eyes searching hers. You belong here. You belong with me. His words felt like a declaration, like a promise, and for a brief moment, she wasn't sure whether she was relieved or terrified. She had saved him, but in the end, it was her life that had changed, her world that had been turned upside down. And now, it was too late to walk away. The days blurred into one another, the weight of Emma's decision settling deeper in her chest. She had made her choice, and now she had to live with it. Dante's world was her world, whether she liked it or not. The mansion, the guards, the constant surveillance, they were all part of her new reality. As much as she wanted to scream, to break free from the invisible chains he had placed around her, a part of her couldn't help but feel drawn to him. The power he wielded, the control he had over everything around him, it was both intoxicating and terrifying. She had saved him, but now it felt as if she had fallen into a trap of her own making. But the more she resisted, the more she realized that her life had irrevocably changed. Dante wasn't just a man she had saved. He was a force, a presence that had taken over her world in ways she couldn't escape. Every time she tried to distance herself, to break away, he pulled her back in. Every word, every glance, every touch was a reminder that she was his, and he wasn't going to let go. The moment of clarity came one night, after another long dinner with Dante and his associates. She had been sitting in the grand dining room, surrounded by people who treated her like a guest, a piece of the scenery. They spoke in hushed tones, their conversations filled with power plays and business deals. Dante was at the center of it all, his sharp eyes observing everything, his voice commanding the room without a word. She couldn't help but feel like a puppet in this world, one whose strings were being pulled by him. The thought unsettled her, but it also sparked something within her, a realization that she could either sink into this life completely or find a way to reclaim her freedom. But how could she escape? Dante had made it clear that she didn't belong to herself anymore. He had taken over every aspect of her life, from the moments of silence to the ones filled with his whispered promises. As the night wore on, Emma couldn't ignore the growing sense of dread in her chest. She knew she had no easy way out. She had seen the dangers, the world Dante was part of. The people who came in and out of the mansion, the ones who obeyed him without question, they were the kind of people who would do anything to keep their secrets safe. And she was part of that now, whether she wanted to be or not. When the dinner ended, Dante walked with her back to her room, his presence filling the hallway as they moved in silence. The air between them was thick with unspoken words, and Emma could feel the tension building with each step they took. He stopped at her door, turning to face her, his eyes searching hers for something. You've been quiet tonight, he said, his voice low, almost too calm. What's on your mind? Emma swallowed hard, her thoughts racing. How could she explain the way she was feeling, the fear that had settled deep in her chest? How could she tell him that she was suffocating, that she wanted to escape? I'm fine, she said, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to sound steady. Dante stepped closer, his hand reaching out to touch her cheek. His touch was gentle, but there was a firmness to it, a reminder that he was in control. You're not fine, Emma, he said softly, his voice a whisper in the quiet of the hallway. I can see it in your eyes. You're afraid. Emma closed her eyes, a wave of frustration washing over her. She had never been good at hiding her emotions, and with Dante, it was even harder. I'm not afraid of you, she said, though the words felt hollow. Dante tilted her chin up, his eyes locking onto hers. Then what are you afraid of? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Losing yourself, Emma whispered, her heart pounding in her chest. I don't want to lose myself in this world. I don't want to be trapped. For the first time, Dante's expression softened. He pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "You're not trapped, Emma," he said, his voice soft but firm. "You're with me now, and I'll never let anything happen to you. You'll never lose yourself. You belong to me, and that's not a bad thing. You don't have to be afraid anymore." His words, though meant to reassure her, did nothing but deepen her fear. She felt the truth of them, but the cost of belonging to him, of being his, was something she wasn't sure she could bear. She had saved him, but in the end, it was her life that had been altered beyond recognition. She didn't know if she could keep living like this, knowing that the world she had once known, the life she had once fought for, was slipping away. But as Dante held her, the comfort in his embrace was undeniable. The promises he had made were all she had now, and for better or worse, she had already made her choice. She was his, and no matter how much she fought it, she would never be free. Experience the thrilling world of dark romance in this captivating story where love, danger, and passion collide. Follow Emma, a woman who saves a powerful man, only to find herself drawn into a life she never asked for. As she navigates Dante's dangerous world, filled with secrets, power, and control, she discovers that her life is no longer her own. In this tale of dark romance, Emma must confront her fears, her desires, and the price of safety in a world ruled by a man who will stop at nothing to keep her close. With every twist and turn, Emma realizes that in this dark romance, there are no easy choices, only a future bound by the man she saved. Will she succumb to the pull of his world, or will she find a way to escape the suffocating grip of love and control? Dive into the world of dark romance and discover a story full of mystery, desire, and an unforgettable love that will leave you breathless. This is a dark romance like no other, where love is as dangerous as it is irresistible.